Uncertainty is now the defining feature of the U.S.-Iran diplomatic track after President Donald Trump delivered two sharply different signals within the span of about an hour about where, if anywhere, talks might resume. In one part of a wide-ranging interview, the president suggested that negotiations could restart in Pakistan almost immediately, floating a dramatic near-term timeline and hinting that an unexpected breakthrough could be close. His language carried the unmistakable tone of a leader trying to project momentum, suggesting that things could move fast and that the next development might come suddenly. At one point, the president urged those watching the process closely not to look away. He said, "You should stay there," a remark framed as both a suggestion and a warning that something big could happen with little notice. The president also offered unusually direct praise for Pakistan's top military figure, describing Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir as a key facilitator in the effort to bring the two sides together. He said, "Fantastic," using the word as a personal endorsement of Munir's role in trying to help create space for diplomacy. But in another portion of the same interview, delivered less than an hour earlier, Trump sounded far less committed to Pakistan as the venue for the next round. There he acknowledged that contacts were continuing, yet portrayed the pace as sluggish and suggested that if a meeting happens, it might be moved elsewhere. The president implied that planners were already considering an alternative. Asterisk, he said, "We'll probably go to another location. We have another location in mind," tags, signaling that even if Pakistan remains on the table, it may not be the preferred destination in Washington's internal deliberations. When the conversation turned to other possible hosts, the president was asked about Turkey. He shut that down quickly, pointing away from Ankara and toward a more central setting, language that hinted at Europe or a location designed to be viewed as more neutral, more logistically convenient, or simply more politically manageable. That split-screen messaging, Pakistan, but maybe not soon, but not certain, has left allies, markets, and regional actors watching for confirmation from official channels, not just off-the-cuff presidential remarks. Behind the scenes, however, there are fresh indications that a return to Islamabad is at least being actively explored. Reuters has reported that a proposal has been shared with both sides that would effectively keep a window open from Friday through Sunday for delegations to return without locking in a firm date. Even the possibility of renewed talks briefly eased pressure in oil markets. On Tuesday, benchmark prices slipped below $100, a market reaction that suggested traders saw the diplomatic channel, however fragile, as a potential release valve. Yet that modest relief came against the backdrop of an escalating Mariti-Me confrontation that remains unresolved, and that could overwhelm negotiations if even one incident spirals out of control. The stakes are unusually high because the last meeting in Islamabad, described as the highest level of direct engagement between Washington and Tehran since Iran's 1979 revolution, ended without an agreement. That outcome didn't just produce disappointment, it triggered serious questions about whether a tenuous two-week ceasefire can survive. Trump, speaking on Monday, said Iran had reestablished contact and still wanted a deal. But he also framed the red line in absolute terms and made clear that, in his view, the U.S. cannot accept any arrangement that preserves what Washington sees as a pathway to a nuclear weapon. Pressed about what had blocked an agreement, the president was blunt about the core issue. He said it was over nuclear, characterizing the dispute as centered on whether Tehran would accept conditions that permanently foreclose a nuclear weapons capability. Trump then delivered the most emphatic and politically consequential line of his remarks, presenting the outcome as binary: either Iran accepts Washington's demand or there is no deal at all. He said Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, repeating the declaration as a definitive guarantee rather than a negotiating position. The president also described the negotiations as having produced movement on multiple issues, but insisted they ultimately stalled at the nuclear threshold. He said, "We agreed to a lot of things, but they didn't agree to that," underscoring his claim that the U.S. had shown flexibility elsewhere, while Tehran had not yet accepted what he considers a central requirement. Then came an even more forceful warning, one that framed U.S. strategy as a mix of diplomacy backed by coercive power. Asterisk, he said, "If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal," placing the burden entirely on Tehran to change course. And the president went further still, pairing the demand with a threat that suggested the U.S. is prepared to act unilaterally if it believes diplomacy cannot secure the objective. He said, "Either we'll get it back from them or we'll take it," a line that read as both deterrence and escalations, an unmistakable reminder that in this White House, negotiations are happening under the shadow of possible force. The U.S. delegation in the Islamabad talks has been led by Vice President J.D. Vance, who has become the administration's primary public face for the negotiating track. Vance has said there was progress in clarifying where Washington could compromise and where it would not. His framing suggested the talks narrowed some gaps but did not bridge the main divide. In his assessment, Iran had moved closer toward the U.S. position, though not far enough to clinch an agreement. The unresolved pieces, he indicated, center on the removal of enriched nuclear material and the construction of a verification system robust enough to satisfy Washington that Iran is not developing a weapon. Vance described the diplomatic moment as one that could still produce what he called a broader normalization if Iran chooses it. His vision echoed a familiar argument in U.S. policy circles that sanctions relief and economic reintegration are possible, but only if Iran abandons nuclear weapons ambition and stops backing militant activity abroad. He suggested there is a grand deal available in theory, but insisted the next move is Tehran's. In his telling, the U.S. team left Pakistan not because the channel is dead, but because the Iranian delegation did not have the internal authority to close the deal, meaning Iranian officials may need to return to Tehran to secure approval from senior leadership before any final package can be accepted. That dynamic negotiators at the table constrained by politics back home is familiar to diplomats, but in this case it is compounded by the broader Creasy environment where diplomacy is being run in parallel with military and economic pressure. And that pressure is intensifying at sea. Since the war began on February 28th, Iran has effectively restricted large portions of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, allowing passage only under Iranian control and with conditions that include payment, moves widely viewed as an attempt to turn global energy transit into leverage. Washington has now responded with its own maritime posture. The U.S. military has said it began blocking shipping traffic in and out of Iranian ports on Monday, an action Iran condemned as piracy, coupled with a warning that if its ports are threatened, no port in the Gulf or Gulf of Oman would be safe. So far, even with the shift in U.S. posture, the picture on the water remains tense but ambiguous. Nearly a day into the blockade stance, Reuters reported no confirmed direct enforcement action against commercial shipping. That does not mean the threat is empty, only it has not yet been tested in a way that produces a visible confrontation, such as a boarding, seizure, or exchange of fire. Tracking data has shown limited movement. On Tuesday, 3 tankers linked to Iran were observed moving through Hormuz, though none were traveling to or from Iranian ports, suggesting that operators are recalibrating routes, minimizing risk, and trying to stay within lanes that the U.S. has said it will not interfere with. U.S. Central Command has told mariners that the blockade would apply to vessels entering or leaving Iranian ports in the Gulf and Gulf of Oman, but that the U.S. would not interfere with neutral transit through Hormuz for ships headed to non-Iranian destinations. That distinction matters, but it also creates a narrow corridor for misunderstanding. Because in any real-world maritime encounter, a ship's true destination, ownership structure, cargo, and paperwork can become disputed in minutes. And with both sides operating in a high-stress environment, a single contested inspection, misread maneuver, or miscommunication could ignite a broader clash. For now, the ceasefire has largely held through its first week, despite rising rhetoric and tightened pressure. But the gap between diplomacy and military escalation remains dangerously small. The White House is keeping the door open to renewed negotiations, even as it increases leverage at sea and signals that economic pain on Iran-linked commerce may deepen. Tehran, for its part, is signaling it may return to the table while warning that threats to its ports or naval access could provoke retaliation. All of that brings the process back to the same unresolved question: is the next step a return to Islamabad, as Trump at times implied, or a shift to a new venue, as he suggested just as explicitly elsewhere? Pakistan's role at minimum appears significant. With Field Marshal Asim Munir positioned as a key broker, Islamabad has been portrayed by Washington as a channel cap able of convening and stabilizing fragile talks. Pakistan's strategic geography, its relationships across the region, and its ability to host high-security meetings make it a plausible venue, especially when the diplomatic timeline is measured in days, not months. But there are also reasons a different location could be attractive. A European setting may be seen as more neutral for optics, potentially easier for Allied participation, and less vulnerable to regional shocks. It could also be a way to broaden international buy-in, especially if any eventual agreement requires coordinated enforcement or relief mechanisms. What is clear is that mixed messaging from the top is now part of the story. When the president signals Pakistan as a near-term destination and nearly simultaneously implies it likely won't happen there, the result is not just confusion, it is leverage and uncertainty rolled together, the kind of ambiguity that can sometimes force counterparts to reveal their priorities. But ambiguity can also backfire, especially when military moves are being read as signals too. Iran may interpret shifting talk venues as indecision. Allies may interpret it as improvisation. Markets may interpret it as fragility, and yet even now, both sides appear to understand that the alternative to dialogue could be an uncontrollable escalation in one of the world's most economically vital waterways. The coming days, especially the Friday to Sunday window that has been informally kept open, may determine whether the diplomatic track can regain momentum or whether it becomes secondary to a maritime showdown that neither side can easily step away from once it begins. For the moment, the world is left watching the same contradiction at the heart of this crisis. A path to talks may be opening, even as the sea lanes are tightening. A ceasefire may be holding, even as threats intensify. And a deal may be imaginable, even as the main sticking point remains the same. And overall, it hangs the president's bluntest line, an absolute demand that leaves little room for creative ambiguity. He said Iran will not have a nuclear weapon.